just going to go get a bite to eat. Do you want to join us? Okay, I'll talk with you later. Pass me some of that bread, will you, please? What do you mean we don't have any bread? How can we not have bread? Surely, oh no, here's some. I got it. I'm good. But do you remember that day that we really did think we ran out of bread? It was the day that Jesus fed the 4,000 with the 7 loaves and the few fish. No, not that one. You're thinking of the one where he fed the 5,000 people with the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, the little boy's lunch. No, I'm thinking of the one after that. You know, we were over in the Gentile region. It was just before we crossed over to Dalmanutha. You'll remember, the crowds had been following us for days. It must have been 3 days, maybe more, hanging on every word that Jesus had to say. And then suddenly we found ourselves in this remote, desolate place, nothing to eat, and Jesus looked at the crowd with this look of utter compassion. It was kind of a gut-wrenching compassion. And he said, if I send these people on their way hungry, they're going to faint before they get home. And then he looked at us like, what are you going to do about it? And we thought to ourselves, what are we going to do about it? Jesus, that's their problem, not ours. But he didn't see it that way. No, when he looked at these people, he saw that this was a people in need, and he expected us to somehow act. Well, we kind of thought, well, what do we have that we can provide to them? We don't have nearly enough food with us. But then we remembered, yeah, but we do have Jesus with us. So he said, so how many loaves of bread do you have between you? We gathered all that we had, and we said, 7. Hardly enough to feed that kind of a crowd. But you know how Jesus gets that twinkle in his eyes? 7, huh? He says. Tell all the people to sit down. And they did. And then Jesus took the loaves of bread that we had with us. He gave thanks and broke it. You know, every time we ate a meal with him, he did exactly the same thing. He gave thanks and broke it. And then he gave the food to us to give to the people, and we did. We fed everybody that day, and everybody ate to their full. And then Jesus said, hey, what about that fish you've got? And we did exactly the same thing. We took him a few little pieces of fish, blessed it, broke it, gave it to everybody, and everybody ate all the bread and fish they could ever want. And then he said, hey, wait about the leftovers. Leftovers, imagine that. Leftovers after feeding 4,000 people. But sure enough, we collected from the crowds, and we gathered in 7 baskets full of leftovers. What a remarkable day. What a remarkable gift. And then, seeing that everybody was already full, he sent them on their way, and we got in the boat and crossed over towards Dalmanutha. You know what I'll always remember about that day? And it's not just the miracle that he did. Of course, that was phenomenal. It's the people that he fed. When he fed the 5,000 before, those were all Jews, brothers and sisters, members of the household of faith. I would almost expect him to care for them. But these folks, they were Gentiles, outcasts, no good for anything. But Jesus loved them like they were family. And that's just it. He loved Jew or Gentile. All the same. When we crossed over to the other side towards Dalmanutha, immediately a group of Pharisees came out and started arguing with him. They were asking him for a sign. We thought, you've got to be kidding. How can you want a sign? He just fed 4,000 people with a little snack pack. What more do you expect him to do? But they were starting to argue. They were asking for a sign that, you know, it just seems so strange to me. Why is it that some people, no matter how much you show them, no matter how much you tell them, they still want some incontrovertible proof that Jesus really is Messiah? You know, they had seen all the miracles that Jesus had done. They'd certainly heard about them. They'd heard what he'd said about himself. They knew who he was, and still they refused to believe until they got one more sign. You know, sometimes I think some people can never be convinced. It finally comes down to just having a measure of faith, of trust. But when the Pharisees asked for a sign, what Jesus gave them was a sigh. It was kind of a deep, guttural groan of despair. We traveled with Jesus for 3 years. I'd never heard him do that. This was, I'm sure, the lowest point I ever saw him get to. Oh, there were plenty of times when he was frustrated with us or exasperated with us over our failure to believe, but this was something deeper still, deeper, sadder. You know, they weren't looking for a sign, not so that they could believe. Jesus knew that they were just looking for one more point that they could argue with him about, one more test he had to pass. And so, very bluntly, he said, no more. Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to this generation. And with that, he turned on his heels and walked straight back to the boat. Well, of course, we followed him, got in the boat, and we sailed to the other side of the sea. And that's when it happened. That's when I asked, hey, does anybody have any bread to eat? You see, we thought that while we were on the other side of the lake, we'd have a chance to go into the village, restock our provisions, get a little something to eat before we took off again. But as soon as this activity with the Pharisees propped up, then suddenly we're in the boat and on our way again, not having anything to eat. So I asked, rather casually, does anybody have any bread to eat? And we discovered we only had one loaf. And I'll admit, I started to panic a little bit. I know it doesn't make any sense, particularly given that he had just fed 4,000 people, but nevertheless, it was kind of getting late in the day, and I was getting a little hungry. And with that, Jesus said, beware. Be on guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. And we looked at each other like, what on earth is he talking about? Is he saying this because we don't have much bread to eat? But then Jesus gave us that look. You know that look he gives? Like, really? He had been lying back in the back of the boat, kind of resting, but he sat bolt upright and looked at us and said, what are you talking about bread for? What part of this don't you understand yet? After all I've shown you and all I've told you about who I am and what I can do, what are you talking about bread for? Are your ears that dull? Are your eyes that closed? Are your hearts that hardened? Do you remember when I fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread and a few fish? How many baskets full of leftovers did you get? And we kind of sheepishly said 12. And when I fed the 4,000 with the 7 loaves of bread, how much leftovers did you have? We said 7 baskets full. Then what part still don't you understand? And we didn't have a single answer for him. We knew he was exactly right. Oh, we had remembered the miracles, the how much and the how many, but we had forgotten the most important part of those miracles, the love, the caring, the compassion of the one who broke the bread and fed the people. We remembered the miracles. We forgot about the love behind the miracles. And when Jesus was talking about yeast of Pharisees and Herod, he wasn't talking about bread. He was saying, be on guard against anyone who's cynical or their hypocrisy, anyone who has a hard heart or a closed heart towards God. That kind of stuff can be influential in your lives. Just avoid them altogether. That's what he was saying. We knew that about the Pharisees. We knew that they were foolish and hard of heart not to believe. But what we didn't know then that we do know now is we were responding in exactly the same way to Jesus. Oh, they were being confrontational with him. They were angry with him in their unbelief. But we, in our unbelief, were just being nice and complacent. I mean, theirs was really an anger, a hostility, a judgmentalism. Ours was simply kind of a dull friendliness. But to both of us, Jesus says, what part do you still not understand? I don't know where you are in your relationship with Jesus, whether you feel angry or if there's a measure of hostility or animosity, or whether you just feel a cool friendship with him. But either way, he asks us to believe him, what he says and who he is. And he wonders, what part of this don't you understand? You know, we followed Jesus for 3 years, and there were plenty of times when he gave us that look, like, really? Where he kind of gave us the sigh of, I thought you'd get it by now. And admittedly, we should have gotten it long before we did. We should have understood far more than we did. But every time he gave us that look, I never got the sense that he was putting us down or pushing us away. No, I kind of got the sense that that look meant, come on, you can get this. Just hang with me a little longer. Just follow me a little closer. Just watch and listen and learn. You'll get it. One day you'll understand. Your heart will be opened. Your ears will be opened. Your eyes will be opened. You'll get who I am. Just stay with me. I heard it as invitation to follow Jesus, even when we don't have all the answers. And you know, whenever he was talking about bread, he wasn't really talking about bread at all. At least not this kind of bread. He was talking about the kind of bread that only he can give, the bread of life. And he offers that to us still today. Now, what part of that don't you understand? Amen.